Okay, thanks for joining us. My name is Declan McCullough. I write about technology, policy, law, politics, all that wonderful stuff for CNET, which is part of CBS, and I occasionally contribute to the website of CBS News as well. With me today is Robert McDowell, who needs little introduction. He's one of the FCC commissioners and was confirmed in 2009 by the U.S. Senate after working in the private sector. Thanks for joining us here at Tech Freedom's Kickoff. There are some obvious questions that you folks in the audience, I'm talking to you, Steve, would ask if I don't, so I'll ask the obvious ones first, and then you can ask the more intelligent ones. The FCC approved the net neutrality order by a 3-2 party line vote on December 21st and released the text of it on FCC.gov at 5 p.m. on the 23rd, because my theory is that nobody wanted to work over the holidays. But I haven't seen this in the Federal Register yet, which I understand means that no legal challenge, if any were to be filed, could happen yet. But it's been 4 weeks or so since December 23rd, so why haven't they appeared in the Federal Register?
Excellent question. First of all, thank you for having me. This was billed as a fireside chat, so I'm really sorry there is no fire. Apparently that was, although I shouldn't yell fire apparently either. That's against the law. But I can't on the internet though. Okay, that's good to know. But we do have these lovely green lanterns here, and I don't know if they're getting ready for St. Patrick's Day a little early. They saw his name and my name and thought maybe there was like a Celtic thing going on. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, thank you for having me. What was the question? The answer, I hate to tell you, the answer to the question is I don't know. There is something in the bowels, there's a bureaucracy in the bowels of the FCC and some coordination sometimes with OMB and things that I don't understand that results in Federal Register publication. So one could blame it partly on the holidays. I don't know. It should, it could pop up any day, and it could pop up today for all I know by the close of business. So I really don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I would be just as happy if it never appeared in the Federal Register. Maybe they'll just forget about it, and then we could be done with this issue.
In fact, you had 35 pages of why exactly you didn't like it very much, including footnotes and some appendices.
I'm glad someone read them. We worked hard on it.
So here at the State of the Net event, which preceded this one yesterday, Representative Blackburn, who's a Republican member of the House Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, announced it was kind of like a do not regulate the internet conservative manifesto. She actually used the term conservative a lot more than Republican manifesto. She said, where Congress fails to lead, bureaucracy rushes in. So is this what happened here at the FCC? This is what's known as a softball question.
Thanks. Well, Congress in a way did lead. Congress sort of spelled out what our jurisdiction is, and just because it said you can't do this, there's a lot of things that it says that it leaves out in terms of, we can't do X, we can't do Y, you can't write statutes that way. So Congress set up our authority. It did not give us, as part of our authority, the power to regulate the internet, and that is the legal threshold problem with it. So, do we have to fear bureaucracies rushing in? Well, I guess we do now, where they clearly don't have the authority to do something. They're going to try to do it anyway.
Moving beyond net neutrality for a moment, and we may well go back, the FCC posted a public notice last August, and it was requesting comments about a cybersecurity roadmap dealing with broadband providers, internet protocols. This is not traditional telecom stuff, and I think that effort is being led by Jeff Goldthorpe of the Public Safety Bureau. So, two questions. First, what's going on with that? And second, where does the FCC have the explicit constitutional, I'm channeling your 35-page dissent and also the new incoming Republican majority, the constitutional authority?
Right. I don't know what's going on there. I haven't been briefed on it, and hope to find out more as you do. And I'm not quite sure what the legal basis would be. Certainly, the FCC can inquire and gather information, but as to whether or not it actually does anything that has a legal effect is another issue altogether. And I would be curious to know what the basis, the argument would be for legal authority to venture beyond.
You may have heard earlier, Barron was on a panel and talked about sort of a pro-progress vision for his new organization. So instead of talking about sort of negatives, where can the federal government actually help facilitate technological progress in this next decade?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of areas. The first area, again, completely outside the FCC's jurisdiction, would be with tax policy. First of all, R&D tax credit, make it larger and make it permanent. Congress just last month extended it for 2 years. That's terrific, a step in the right direction, but why not make it permanent? Do we only want research and development in this country to last for 2 more years? Is that what Congress is saying by doing that? I don't think so. So let's do that. What about accelerated depreciation for technology-related equipment purchases? What about special tax credits for small businesses? Or what about special tax credits for companies that help promote things like telecommuting and things of that nature? I think there's a lot that can be done to help really get government out of the way. Regulations like taxes really diminish things, slow things down, punish things, and you get less of the thing that you are regulating or taxing as a result. So let's really review all of our regulations across agencies and the tax code as well to figure out what could be streamlined in order to kind of get government out of the way.
Another government out of the way question, or maybe not, is Level 3 in Comcast spent a good portion of November, or at least it seemed that way to me, in what amounted to a business dispute about peering, and then Netflix was drawn in as well. And peering has been around for decades without FCC regulation. It generally seems to work as a more or less outside observer. So should the FCC be involved in that area?
I don't think so. I'm not sure the FCC would have jurisdiction to be involved with that area, but as a policy matter, even if we did right now, you just pointed out that since the inception of the Internet, since the concept of peering was born, it has been self-governing and it's actually worked out quite well. And where there are traffic asymmetries, it gets worked out. So if Level 3 in this case was alleging some sort of antitrust concern, a concentration and abuse of market power, then conceivably that should be looked at by the expert antitrust authorities, the Department of Justice, Antitrust Division, and the Federal Trade Commission. But in the interim, this is an area where America has done quite well under the current deregulatory model, and it's probably best left alone.
I don't think the audience would let us get away without at least talking about Comcast NBC. And you and one of your fellow commissioners had a joint statement sort of reluctantly concurring. You said it exceeded its limited statutory bounds. That's talking about the review, potential to shape the future of entire industries. That's on the basis of a limited record. These are pretty direct statements. Is there anything else you'd like to say beyond that?
Well, so more specifically, as we said in the statement, there might be some laudable things done in the order, that there are laudable things that Comcast will have to do as a result, but the question is, what did they really have to do with the specifics of this particular merger, which was a vertical merger? So one can say that you're being a good corporate citizen if you expand broadband deployment, and if you try to spur adoption by giving computers to low-income households. Those are all wonderful things, but should the government have mandated that, or should it have been proffered up in advance as a sweetener so that the government would approve your merger? And of course, there's the open internet back to net neutrality provision, which I give the chairman some credit that he, over Commissioner Baker's and my objection, took that out of the conditions of the order, but then negotiated a side letter agreement with Comcast that both of those parties, the chairman's office and Comcast, deemed to be enforceable. So this would actually have Comcast live under the net neutrality order of December 21st, even if it's overturned in court. Didn't say anything if it should be overturned by Congress, but if it's overturned by a court. So that is something which, historically Comcast and companies like it have opposed. But when companies are vulnerable and before a regulatory agency, this has all too often become an opportunity for government to extract to extract conditions and concessions from those companies that may or may not have something to do with the transaction itself.
So we're at this next Digital Decade book event. Let's go back almost a decade. And in 2003, I went over to the FCC and asked this question of then Chairman Powell. I said, as more and more traffic goes over IP, does that mean that the FCC could become less important to the point that portions could shrink and eventually go away? And his response then was, it could happen someday, and that day isn't anywhere near close. Well, it's been 8 years. Are we there yet?
So your question could touch on many different things. Perhaps back in the day, I don't know how your question was framed or the intent of it, 8 years ago. But sort of all the rage was how would voice traffic migrating to IP affect universal service in particular. And that universal service really was designed to assess analog interstate voice services in order to help subsidize telephone service as we grew up knowing it. So in that, everything is going IP right now, or as Vint Cerf says, IP on everything. How is that changing that? Well, certainly we've seen the pool in universal service shrink, the contribution pool shrink. We've seen the contribution factor spike up to well over 15%, and it was 5% maybe 15 years ago or so. So in terms of universal service, it has had a profound effect. We are launching part of the universal service puzzle in an NPRM on February the 8th, coincidentally the 15th anniversary of the signing of the Telecom Act of '96. But it won't really address the contribution side. It's going to address the distribution side. I think it really should be more holistic how we approach this. I've been on record saying this for many years now. But so the point there is, are we going to start creating, here's what we're going to spend our money on, and then we'll worry about how we're going to pay for that later? That seems to be backwards in terms of the flow chart that I would have in mind. But if part of your question also means sort of what's the future of the FCC,
writ large,
or Title II, yeah, excellent question. So it's always healthy to have that discussion of as technology evolves and as consumer behavior evolves, what is the role of the FCC? As we talk about spectrum reallocation, and the idea of spectrum scarcity that underpins regulation of over-the-air broadcasting, as that may be a question that breaks beyond just the bounds of law review articles and economic journals, but actually might be a question before the Supreme Court someday. I think the FCC's ability to control and regulate broadcasters will be called into question. But these are longer-term issues and longer-term questions. We'll see where it goes. I don't think the FCC is going anywhere in the short term, but I think it's always helpful and healthy to have this discussion.
So we look back a decade. Let's look forward a decade. It seems appropriate given the title of the book. I feel like I should be getting a kickback for this or something like that, but they're giving away for free. How optimistic, pessimistic should we be about the next digital decade?
I really am an incurable optimist, provided government doesn't somehow distort the market and get things wrong. When it comes to wireless, for instance, I've said many times I think we're just now entering the golden age of wireless. When my gray hair turns white, there will be so many new technologies out there that we can't possibly foresee now that will improve the human condition overall. It will be absolutely incredible. But I do worry about what government might do. I think the last panel made a great outline just in the context of internet governance as to what's going to happen as we see more and more sort of mission creep of governments across the globe getting into this space. And what that will mean. Government is a blunt instrument, and frequently the unintended consequences of government actions create more harms than the intended benefits of those actions. So let's be very circumspect, and if there's not evidence of a concentration and abuse of market power, and it's otherwise thriving, let's leave it alone.
I can't help myself. I want to go back to net neutrality for a moment. We heard Representative Blackburn yesterday, and we also saw the new Speaker of the House say this is a terrible idea. And I mean, there are lots of discussions about a defunding part of the FCC, or removing the FCC's ability to go forward with this. Any predictions you'd like to make
on what Congress is going to do?
Exactly.
You know, I live by the rule that Congress tells me what to do. I don't tell Congress what to do. But I will take some key members of Congress at their word that they will introduce legislation, and it very well could pass both houses of Congress and be presented to the President for his signature.
And
we'll leave you hanging as to what happens after that, right? In suspense.
Okay, then how about the predictions about who's going to file the first lawsuit?
Someone who's unhappy with the order.
You can't think of anyone at all?
You know, I think there are a lot of candidates. It'll be interesting to see, though, if there's an attempt by pro-regulation proponents to try to file in a circuit that they think might be friendlier to them. I think that's risky for a number of reasons, and I think if that happens and this ends up going to the Supreme Court, ultimately the FCC's order will fail, whether it's at the intermediate appellate court level or at the Supreme Court. But I'm not going to wager as to who is going to do that. I think there might be a number of parties who will file a notice.
You're really intent on avoiding making news right now.
I hear some clicking. I hear reporters clicking. Right? Maybe they're tweeting or something. I don't know. But,
well, if only whoever files would have a 35-page document to draw from that laid out a roadmap for a lawsuit, then they'll be in good shape. We only have about 13 minutes left if we're going to stay on schedule. So you folks in the audience are smarter than I am. Let's take some audience questions. In the second row, I saw your hand up. And hold on, let's wait for the microphone. And also, if you could identify yourself, that would be great.
Hi, Eliza Krigman with Politico. As we know, you're not happy with all the conditions on the NBC-Comcast merger. Could you tell us which condition you dislike the most and why?
And this is the first chance I've had to talk to you in person, I think, since you made the switch to Politico, so congratulations on the new job. So, yeah, it would have to be, I think, the net neutrality condition, which is really a commitment, but not a condition that Commissioner Baker and I voted on. But to have one market player live by rules that the rest of the market would not have to live by in the event that it is overturned on appeal seems to be an act of misguided public policy. Comcast has to live by all of the relevant rules that are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations, right? So there is no need to enumerate each of those rules again in the order or in the conditions or in the letter of commitment. So why just have one party live under those rules and not the rest of the industry should it fail in court would be my question.
Yes, if you could wait for the microphone. Thanks, Adam.
Oh, hi, Andrew Keane, I'm a writer. I had a question about network neutrality. I'm not really an insider here, but I was, I won't say shocked, struck by you and Commissioner Baker's sort of unwillingness to even consider any of these rules. How would you respond to the fact that many of the industry players, AT&T particularly comes to mind, seem to be willing to accept that some degree of compromise was necessary, and that many of the telecoms and the large media companies are sympathetic to the compromise cobbled together?
Right. So first of all, I don't want to speak for Commissioner Baker, but for years I've studied this issue and have considered the rules. And the first question I always ask is, what is broken? What is broken that only the government can fix? That second part being very important. And the answer time and time again, as the government multiple times threw out its dragnet and tried to dredge up evidence of a market failure, the answer was nothing. Nothing was broken. Each of the maybe handful of examples that were pointed to by net neutrality proponents were resolved in favor of consumers under existing law. And the antitrust laws and consumer protection laws, at least of the U.S., stand at the ready for all the situations that the Internet regulation proponents offered up as the scenario to justify the rules. So nothing was broken, and nothing was broken that only the government could fix. And as we heard very eloquently on the previous panel, the Internet has really flourished since its inception because it was a bottom-up, sort of wiki-based way of self-governance. And it is something that really, just by an engineer's perspective, defies top-down authoritarianism. In addition, I mean, I don't want to recite the entire 35 pages. It's 132 footnotes. But anyway...
it's been circulating on Twitter as we're speaking.
Yeah, I'm sure. How many characters are you limited to on Twitter? But anyway, the chain reaction that this can start internationally to say that each government can get into this business. You know, what we might think is reasonable, and I'm not saying that my the other three colleagues on the commission who voted in favor of that order aren't reasonable people. They are. But in other countries, are we inviting them to do the same thing and to impose upon their piece of the Internet, or the Internet even globally, their idea of what's reasonable? So there were a lot of concerns there. We looked at it and considered it, but that threshold question could never be answered yet. Yes, there's something broken. Here's how it is broken, and here's the best way to resolve it. What we're now opening the door to is more rulemaking by adjudication. So this is not, I'm happy to entertain all the net neutrality questions, because this is going to be an issue that's not behind us. It's going to be presented to us as soon as the rules become effective and the first complaint is filed, whether it's against Metro PCS or whatever the case might be. As that seemed to be how the saber was being rattled here just a few weeks ago. So as soon as that first complaint is filed, we're going to have to relive this again and again and again, and the markets will remain uncertain as the interpretation of the word reasonable, perhaps the most litigated word in American history, is litigated again and again before the FCC, and that's why I'm hopeful there will be a stay. As far as why did a small, very small pool of corporate entities decide to very reluctantly send out issue statements of perhaps acquiescence more than support, you'd have to ask them, but they have to continue to do business before the FCC, and maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know, but ask them.
Let's sort of work our way back. Adam and then Milton.
Thanks. Well, Rob, you'll be happy to know I do not have a question about net neutrality. So let me talk to you about process and transparency and just the FCC and open government or good government, because it seems like a lot of your dissents go back to that key issue about accountability, transparency, authority, constitutionalism. I mean, this
is crazy talk, Adam.
Yeah, crazy.
Sorry.
So, again, I want to see if you can maybe make some news here, because I have to think that the FCC, based upon a lot of your statements, seems to be one of the least transparent and in some ways least accountable agencies when it comes to, ironically enough, the release of information. I mean, here's an agency who's dealing in the world of information policy, and yet when it comes to releasing its own or getting an order out, sometime before midnight, the night before a vote, or getting the final order out after a vote, and it takes weeks. This is an astonishing track record and a pathetic one, I think. No? What do you say?
I think you're the one making the news, Adam.
No, I'm trying to put words in your mouth, of course, but go ahead and repeat them.
So why isn't the FCC transparent? I mean, if the new Republican leadership of the House is putting all committee votes and documents online and actually doing some very good steps towards transparency, why not the FCC?
All the process issues really are better addressed to the chairman. I don't mean to sidestep it, but these are excellent questions to ask. But if you feel that way, I think the chairman's office ought to hear your questions. We, as 5 commissioners, we each have an equal vote, but the chairman controls the process at the FCC. So anything regarding timing or transparency is really best left addressed to him.
Adam is preparing his 150-page filing as we speak. Milton.
Okay, back to net neutrality. Sorry.
After that brief commercial break.
Look, it's a very simple substantive question. Are you familiar with what Canada did about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago? They had a proceeding on internet traffic management practices, and I believe they did come up with some kinds of regulations that said basically you can't unreasonably discriminate, and you have to respect privacy and the use of deep packet inspection. And I don't know, the internet hasn't collapsed in Canada, but I don't know how. I know that some net neutrality advocates were disappointed with those rules, but I also know that they were in some way stepping in. So I just wondered if you were familiar with that precedent and what you thought of it.
Sure. I mean, it's certainly an example, and we have looked at it. And you know, at the same time, more recently, the EC decided not to do really anything in that regard. So I think you can look around the world and say, look, the internet didn't collapse, and I've never said the internet would collapse. But we have to wonder, long term. Long term, this is interesting. The most common request we get at the FCC is, please regulate my rival. Okay. Right. Declan's running too fast, FCC. Could you please slow him down? All right. So let me describe a company to you.
It's a good line. What can I say?
Let me describe a company to you. It has thousands of miles of fiber. It has soft switches. It has servers. It offers voice, video, and data. Is that company AT&T? Is it Microsoft? Is it Comcast? Or is it Google? It's all of the above, right? So the question then becomes, as consumers are demanding convergence, they're demanding intelligence within the pipes as well as outside the pipes. Government can't continue to think in this sort of stovepipey way. And we need to, keep this in mind as we go forward. And I think the FCC has lost track of that.
We have time for one more question. Anyone? Barron is saying no more time. No, come on. Now we've got this room for 3 more minutes, right? Fork over that microphone. Anyone?
Lynn Stanton over there.
Okay.
Just following up on your last remark that government can't continue to think in the stovepipey way. Hasn't Congress told you to think in a stovepipey way? I mean, there's Title I, Title II, Title III.
Right, so when it comes to information services, Congress has told us that we're really not supposed to be regulating it like a Title II service. So you're right to say that, yes, I think that statutes should be looked at and hopefully will be modernized over time. Again, Congress tells me what to do. I don't tell Congress what to do. But we don't have the authority to foist upon the internet anything that looks like telephone regulation, whether you call it Title I or Title II, or Title II under the disguise of Title I.
I think that's it, folks. Let's thank the Commissioner for stopping by.
Thank you.